Welcome to Foundation and Family, where we talk about everything real estate related and family life. Today, I have the pleasure of having Michelle Gurney with us, one of our top producing agents here at Erica Diaz Team. So, we are going to focus on what the market is doing today because some of the news articles that I see coming out through the Orlando Sentinel or through even AI or Facebook or wherever it might be, they tend to report things a little differently than we are experiencing them. So I thought we would take this opportunity to kind of dive in and tell you how our experience is going in the marketplace today and how our buyers and sellers are seeing the market react to them. So let's dive right in. How are you doing in this market right now?
It started out a little rocky. I
Okay.
think it's still a little rocky based on what my goals are,
Yeah.
and being able to help some of my clients that are looking to buy but maybe just aren't quite there yet.
Right.
And then everybody said, "Oh, you should become a listing agent because it's so easy and fun." I'm like, "Okay, so I'm going to focus more listing this year," and I am more listing heavy. And now I'm like, "This is hard.
Yeah.
I need a buyer or two."
Yeah. So let's talk about listings. So at the moment, our team has 32 current listings, and we are averaging about 45 to 50 days on market for all of those. So,
Right.
what does that mean in layman's terms to the consumer? How are you experiencing market time for your sellers right now?
For my sellers, I am trying to set that standard ahead of time. If we get an offer in 90 days, we're doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, and I guess we need to take that a step further and say that is 100% price point driven
Mhm.
because we do have some listings that are in that $200,000 range and we can barely get them on market before they go pending. But even in that range, we're still seeing this buyer mentality asking for seller concessions. So if you're going to market at one price, it's often right now that you are not achieving that one price.
Right.
So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's accurate. So I had three short-term condos come up in that 200 to 220 to like 260 price point.
Right.
Went under contract within 24, 48 hours. One
Right.
of them went under contract. We didn't even have it listed yet.
Right.
But we were able to say, "Hey, we have this coming up." Bam, got an offer on it.
Right. Now,
Then
any of them at list price though?
the first one, no, because that buyer was like, "Well, you bought too high," and
Yeah.
so and they're cash, and so then we had to overcome that because just because a buyer has cash, they feel like, "Oh, we can offer, you know, what is it, like 25% lower than the list price," it seems
Sure.
like.
That's what they think.
Right. And so just trying to overcome that is kind of challenging on when I'm working with the seller. And then the other two, they came in, I think, a little bit over list price because they're also investors that knew that community is very
Lucrative.
lucrative, and we priced right to get rid of it. So,
So that's the other key thing that you just said. We priced right. So what I'm experiencing, and you can tell me what you're experiencing, if you price just slightly over where you think you want to be, you're sitting and you're sitting and you're not even getting showings. But
Mhm.
if you price competitively, it does kind of create that frenzy still, even in the higher price points. But
Right.
personally, my house is on the market and it has been crickets. It has been very, very, very slow. Now, my neighbor three doors down, they are priced, they are on the market too. And in our area where we are, there hasn't been any homes trade in quite a few years on the water there. So they're listed for a little bit less than us because they're about 1,000 square feet smaller. But I called them and they have had two showings in 50 days. So that's that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. And
Yeah.
as a seller right now, leaving and making sure my house is ready, that is also very hard. And I think as a listing agent, you're just like, come on, seller, get ready. Let's go. Let's go. And just be ready 100% of the time. And that's unrealistic and it's challenging and it's frustrating. And I had the experience maybe a weekend ago where somebody pulled up in my driveway. They clicked on showing time and they asked for a showing in 2 minutes. And it was a Saturday. I have four kids. We had just left. There was no approving a showing. And maybe my behavior towards that agent who represented themselves as being a professional, which I would argue that is not professional to ask for a showing in 2 minutes time. I wasn't the kindest, and so that didn't bode well. But how are your sellers reacting? And we have told sellers in my space, you have to be ready. You have to be ready. So how are your sellers reacting to like the short notices or going out of their way to approve them? How are they reacting to that?
So they don't love it. And I actually had this happen, I think 2 days ago, where on Sunday, actually it happened. I was showing a house in a community, and the seller or the buyer goes, "Oh, by the way, I saw one right a street over on the way in. I want to see that one." Well, I pull it up. Of course, it's owner occupied, and I let them know, it takes about 24 hours to get approval if it's owner occupied.
Right.
I can see if I can get a 2-hour window.
Yeah.
So setting that standard with the buyer when we're
Sure.
out, so they know. And then I called the agent and I'm like, listen, I try to hold myself very professional. I
Right.
do both sides, so I totally get this, and I hate when people do this.
Right.
But I'm going to ask you, is the seller, able to accommodate a short notice showing?
Very short notice.
Very short notice. Like we're like a street behind them. We're looking at their house right now. And so he was like, well, let me see what I can do. And he called me back and he was like, at best, it could be an hour. And I said, perfect. I went with my client. I said, let's go grab some lunch. Let's talk
Perfect.
about this one that we've just reviewed. And then we will prepare for the next one.
So that
And
works.
yeah,
That definitely works. I think it is all in the delivery and the professionalism, though, because what I am still finding, because I'm the team lead, I'm still very involved in all of the offers that come through. And you got an offer from an agent who's with a big brokerage, one of my favorites,
yes,
and they put the names on the contract, right?
yes,
And the price.
correct.
Did they put anything else on the contract?
They filled out our title information, which I
Okay.
was really impressed with.
Okay.
But I was already prepared for what was coming because the day before he goes, does your name go on the seller line? And I'm like selling agent line? Like I was confused and I was out like at appointments. So I was taken off a little bit by the question. And he goes, no, like the seller line. And I'm like, no, well, I'm not the seller of that property. So I would go on the bottom because on my listings, I do ask to add your name and my name.
Sure.
Just because then they're sending me a contract and then I'm changing it. And then
Right.
I never know, like, do they need an initial that I made a change? So I've just figured, let me just ask to add both names. So I thought that's
Sure.
what the question was.
But the question was, in fact, do you go in the seller line?
Correct.
So we get the offer in.
We got the offer in.
It is not signed by the buyer.
No.
So for any new agents out there, I'm going to give you a PSA. When you're presenting an offer, fill in all the blanks and have it signed by the buyer, because that is how you present an offer. So you said, hey, this isn't even signed by the buyer.
Right. And so I called him because at this level, like I thought maybe this was just he didn't
Oh,
mean.
this is $1 million house. That's the level she's referring to.
Yeah. And it's, well, I don't want to say what the off. Yeah.
Th-
We'll just leave it that. But
It's a
so,
7-figure house.
Yes. So anyway, I called him. I was like, hey, listen, I am trying to ask this question in the nicest way possible because I don't want it to come off as being rude. And I really want to get this house sold. So I'm
Yeah,
just
of
trying to
course.
play nice in the sandbox. I'm like, are you a new agent? And he said, yes. I said, great. I'm kind of a new agent too. I know exactly what it's like.
Right.
Do you have a mentor? And he's like, well, no. And I'm like, well, he said yes, he does, but they review the offers after it's submitted. And I said, okay, because I'm on a really good team. If you haven't Googled us yet, you should totally Google us. We have a great mentorship program. I would have never allowed you to submit an offer like this without me first reviewing it.
Right.
And neither would have anybody on our team. And I said, and he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, first of all, it's not even signed by the buyer.
Right.
His response was, oh, well, I thought you send it off to your seller. If they accept, they sign it, then you send it back to me.
That's not how this works.
Mm-mm. So then I said, okay, how did you fill the contract out? He goes, well, I Googled on how to like fill out a contract. And I'm like, in my head, I'm screaming.
Yeah.
Because that it's just a lot.
And I want to be very clear. I am not against new agents. Actually,
No.
I take on brand new agents a lot. That's usually what we take. And I enjoy the training process, but you are out there operating a 7-figure contract. You really should know how to operate it. So
Right.
sellers, in my opinion, they're not getting list price. They're sitting on market a little longer. They're getting offers that are poorly presented. So hopefully their representation is really good, because thank God you are who you are. And you were like, listen, my job is to sell this house 100%. So I'm going to help you help me.
Right.
And we got it together and we got the contract well, but it was not without lots of extra work.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things like I said, I'm still a fairly new agent, so I totally respect, I understand where I came from. I'm not passing judgment. I actually tried to do single agent at first because I was afraid of not being the level of the EDT team.
She's crazy.
So I wanted to get experience under my belt before I joined her team, but actually I realized very quickly I need the EDT team because I need that strong mentorship, and you're dealing with some of the biggest assets that people will
Correct.
ever make.
Correct.
And in fact, he made a mistake too because he put on the line for the buyer or assignable, but then he checked that it's not assignable.
Right.
So it's simple mistakes like that. What happens if I wouldn't have caught that? We would have got to the closing table. He wanted to assign that to find out he can't assign it because
Right.
his agent never checked the right box.
My perspective, our sellers are just sitting a little longer. It's just a little bit harder, and we have to do really good jobs of communicating. Now, when I look at an Orlando Sentinel article that was pushed out, it said inventory is rising, but the market's still on fire. And I personally feel like, from my experience, that I wouldn't consider the Central Florida market that we work in on fire. I would consider it moving towards that balanced market where you've got equal sellers and equal buyers. But we'll talk about buyers here in a second, but I wouldn't say our market is on fire. So I felt like that was misleading. And I feel like there's a lot of information that's circling the internet, and it's written by people that I'm not really sure are even in the industry. And there's one perception that a seller has when we go to meet them is, oh, the market's on fire, I'm going to get 50,000 over asking. No, I don't believe that to be correct right now. That's not my experience. And I feel like we are definitely in the trenches of this market, and we are definitely one of the higher producing teams in Central Florida. So we have a good sampling to pull from.
Right. I think it's educating them because I think sellers are still in that mindset that the house is going to go within 24 to 72 hours,
Right.
and they're going to get over asking price. And I'm trying to set the standard with them. I rather set the standard a little low so we look good when we get above.
Yeah.
But just say, listen, like if I can get your house under contract in 90 days, that's a win.
Yeah.
And, you might be offering seller concessions. And
Right.
what does that look like for you? What do you need to net on this house after you pay your closing costs, after you pay your agent fees, all the
Yeah.
things, because it is balanced and it can go either way. It really comes
Sure.
down to seller motivation.
Yeah.
Because
And buyer motivation.
right, if that seller isn't motivated to the house, if they bought the house a year ago at a certain price and now things are selling 60, 70,000 below what they even bought it, they can't really offer seller concessions. They're just trying to
Yeah.
narrow the debt that
Yeah.
they're the loss.
100%. And when we're talking about narrowing the debt, we're actually seeing some short sales. So we are actively engaged in 2 right now. And it's funny because another agent called and said, well, can we do the assumable mortgage? I said, well, the assumable mortgage is 710. The bank approved price is in the 600s or the 500s. If you want to try the assumable, I'm sure the bank will let you assume the whole thing. And they said, no, we only want to assume 500 of it. And I'm like, well, that's not how that works. So let's shift over to like buyers right now and what we're seeing in the buyer pool, because they just announced Hometown Heroes, and that's been huge, where you can qualify for up to $35,000 in essentially free money. We'll include a link below so you can kind of get more familiar with that if you're not, or you can reach out to one of our lenders. It's not exactly free, but it's tremendously
Right.
helpful. So What's your experience with buyers right now?
So with buyers, it's tough for them at that high interest rates. And
Yeah.
so trying to get creative to help them and letting them know, like, yes, you might have been approved for X amount when interest rates were 5, 6 and a quarter. That's not what you're approved at 7%.
Right.
And so a lot of buyers now are like, well, I don't want to look at lower purchase
Price.
prices
Yeah.
because I was approved for this. And then it's like, okay, well, you were never approved for that.
Yeah.
You should have never been in that higher price point, and letting them know, like, you don't want to be home poor.
Sure.
And so what do you
Sure.
want your quality of life to be? It's better to try to go down, look at
Right.
the purchase price a little bit lower. Let's get some seller concessions
Correct.
for you, because I love the Hometown Hero program. I would have to go back and look, but I think I helped like 5 or 6 people last year.
Yeah.
And 3 of them would have never been able to buy because
Without it.
they had good jobs. They had steady income. They didn't have enough to cover the closing costs and
down payment.
down payment.
Right.
And so, no, this isn't essentially free. You will have to pay it back if you want to sell the home.
But it's a silent second. It sits there at 0% interest. So no, it's not free. But there are other programs out there, and we are seeing those exercised a ton.
Right.
And I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I believe when you bought your house, you were able to take advantage of a grant.
We had a grant. So we were renting in a certain area of Central Florida, zip code, and I was able to get $10,000, and I think that is
free.
I don't have to pay that back at all.
So that one's really cool. We actually looked at different apartment complexes. You weren't in an apartment, but we looked at apartment complexes in different zip codes, and 34787 has some, 34761. So it's not just certain zip codes. It's quite a bit. It's many of them.
It's like pockets around Central Florida.
It is pockets, but they're in all of the zip codes for the most part. And you can qualify for this $10,000. So it can make that home ownership much more achievable. And then if you're getting seller credits, it can get that price down. But it's important that you're working with someone who knows all the different tricks and tips of the trade, because if you're just going in blindly, you're definitely leaving money on the table. And in this market, it's important to definitely exhaust any resource that you can possibly get. So,
and that goes back to, you want to have a really strong lender who knows these things.
Yes.
And a strong agent, because we work hand in hand.
Sure.
And what I love about our lenders is, when am I showing houses? I'm showing houses after 5 on weekdays, and I'm showing them Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah.
I was really frustrated this Sunday that I had to host Father's Day, because there were so many requests coming through, and I really was like, I might be able to dip out and they won't even recognize I'm gone, but I didn't. But the thing is it was Father's Day, and I know we have a couple lenders that I can call on a holiday and they can get me a pre-approval.
Yeah.
And so when you are getting these down payment assistance programs and you're asking for seller concessions, some of them have a cap where you can only get so much.
Yes.
So, hey, that's cool. I just got you $30,000 in closing costs and down payment, but we have a $20,000 cap.
Sure.
So $10,000
just goes to waste.
Goes to waste.
But if you know that in the front end, sometimes you can negotiate it off a price if it was in a seller concession. So it's really like maximizing that and being the most creative that you can. But you have to be working with someone who is definitely learning and researching and understanding those grant programs, because a lot of people hear grant and then they think government and they think, oh my gosh, it's too hard. It's really not that much harder, and it's not adding time to the contract. So for me, I feel like our buyers have been less willing to commit, a little bit more uneasy and unsure. But the only thing I go back to that is, we've got one buyer right now, and they are afraid if they lose their job or what have you. And I'm like, but you have been renting for 3.5 years and you're paying 100% rent. I know that your mortgage is going to be $100 more, but the amount of equity that you would have gained in those 3 years' time is tremendous. So there's always a time and a space for renting. I am actually going to be a renter pretty soon myself. So there is a time and a space, but it's not a permanent thing. It shouldn't be a permanent thing. It doesn't build wealth. It doesn't build equity. It doesn't.
Right.
it doesn't build anything.
And I
So,
had that same fear because I bought in 2008.
yeah.
I got the keys to my house and the market tanked and I was upside down. Fast forward, what was it, like a year and a half later, I lost my job.
Yeah.
I took a $30,000 pay cut. I had to restructure my life. And so now buying a house, I had a lot of fear. And like
Yeah.
when I get like nervous, I just shut down and it's like business. And my husband would tell me so many times, like, God, you're like so unemotional about this house. Like, it's all numbers to you. I'm like, yeah. Do you not remember we lost our first house?
Yeah.
So I am making sure that that doesn't happen this time. It's only going to be on your income because my income, I don't know.
Right.
And in the moment, I was in a lull of
Yeah.
business because it was January, February, March. And
Yes. Those are always fun months.
that's real month, but that's real
It is.
estate
It
is you
is.
can't guarantee.
Yeah.
I think I had like 4 or 5 closings in December, which
Yeah.
was great, but
It's
then I
huge.
had nothing until like April.
Yeah.
And so I said, we need to prepare for the worst. I do not want to lose our next house. So if we can buy on a comfortable budget that we're comfortable with your income,
Yeah.
then we'll go. And so,
Well, and then those unknowns, right? Where insurance, we were seeing articles coming out that insurance is ever increasing. And I'll get personal. We just got dropped by Citizens. I mean, when they drop you, they give you like a 9-month notice. So my insurance agent will figure that out. I didn't even know you could get dropped by Citizens because, again, that's like the government program. That's where you go when you can't get insurance. And for the record, I promise I have never even made a homeowner's insurance claim. And we've been homeowners since I was 21, I believe, maybe 20 even. But our house specifically, given its location and it's on the water, it just isn't one that they want to insure. And so now we're looking at some other options through our insurance agent, and they're significant, like $12,000 to $15,000 a year. When we first bought the home, they were $1,600 for the
wow,
insurance.
that's
So,
insane.
again, we're on the market. So if you want to buy our house, but, I think that that's important that we even prepare people for success later down the road and don't set them up for failure and just have those conversations about what insurance could look like in a year or two. And we could be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how this market is a little volatile, but getting more balanced. And I think that, the saying, like, date the house, not, date the rate, marry the house, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I know that that's very cliche, but you are getting some of that seller concession. You are getting a little bit less in the purchase price right now. And you can always refi that when the time comes. Whereas if you were paying $50,000 over, you can't refi out the debt. You just can't.
No, and I was just going to say, like, that's a good point. And so the joke was when Mike and I were looking to purchase our house, like, man, we really know how to pick the seasons, right? Like, we bought in 2008 when the market crashed, and now we're buying now with a 7% interest rates. But honestly, I think now is the best time. I think it's like
Right.
a hidden secret. Everybody's so afraid to buy because of what the media is telling you.
Yeah.
But rewind 2021, 2020, even like parts of
Oh, yeah.
2022, you're in such a competitive market. I
Right.
remember
Oh, yeah.
our one client in Davenport, we listed his house, we sold it within like 4 hours, but he needed a house and we couldn't find one. We were one of 72 offers at one point.
That's crazy.
And
It's
we
crazy.
skipped inspection, which I never recommend ever.
Yep.
We
I know
went,
exactly what client you're talking about
yes,
now.
we went like, what was it, like 20,000 over list
Yep.
price because he bought his house so long ago. He was going to have that extra cash.
Right.
And the seller saw an offer that he liked and didn't even keep on. He was overwhelmed. And so
Yeah.
when the interest rates drop, we're going to go back to that multiple offers. You're going to
Oh,
be
sure.
paying 10, 20,000
Yeah.
over that list price. Do you have the cash to cover
Well,
that?
and again, not only that, you hit the nail on the head when you said you skipped inspections. And in that case, if we're talking about the same
Mm-hmm.
client, that kind of came out and bit everybody in the butt too
Yeah.
6 months later. And
Right.
maybe seller knew, maybe they didn't know. I'm going to go with they did. But we didn't have an inspection because we were one of 72 offers. You had to be competitive. So you have that opportunity to actually dive into what you're buying, have an inspection, negotiate some of those repairs. I know we're working on as-is contracts. If you don't know what that means, reach out. We'll help you with that. But you have opportunity in this market, whereas you didn't have opportunity. Sellers had lots of opportunity, but the buyer didn't have lots of opportunity. So
Right.
in my opinion, it's definitely a space for buyers, but they are a little uneasy. And it is an election year. I mean, everybody's talking about that. And I think everyone's kind of holding their breath to see like what is going to happen. And so even July 12th, I think the feds met and I had people saying, let's wait and see what they do. Well, turns out they didn't really change anything. So you can either keep holding your breath or you can go ahead and purchase. And one thing I can guarantee right now is I can guarantee what the price is today. In 6 months from now, I don't know what they'll be. They might be higher, they might be lower. The
Right.
interest rate might be higher, might be lower, right?
I think last year they said you're going to have interest rates in the spring. The spring came, we never had, or the rates were going to drop.
Yes, they
Never,
did.
never had it.
Yeah.
Then they said in the summer interest rates will drop.
Yeah, they
Never
did.
happened.
Yes.
Then they said in the fall they would drop. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
It happened that short window between Christmas, like Christmas Eve to New Year's Day. Remember, we had a little bit of
A
a
little
drop
bit, yeah.
there, and I'm like, this is a sick joke. Everybody's so focused on Christmas right now. This is when they're going to drop the rates,
Yeah.
and because people are preoccupied.
Yeah.
And then they started creeping up, and we haven't gone down really since.
No, not really. And I think when I was reading, and this might be not a fact, so you can fact check me, but I think there were 11 increases between 21 and 22. So 11 increases with very little decreases. So that's a huge jump, 11 jumps. So I don't think we'll get down to those threes. I think fives probably, but it feels to me like it'll be after election.
Yeah.
So I don't know though. I don't work for the White House.
And if it is, just remember that's when you're going to have the multiple offers.
Yeah.
When the rates go down, the home prices go up.
But there won't be hometown heroes. So it's
Mm.
kind of like you can't have the perfect storm. Like you've got to have, it's a give and take. Do you need $35,000 to help you buy your first home? Or do you have that money sitting there and you want to really capitalize on a lower rate? So I don't think there's ever the perfect day. It's really just when it's good for you. So, well, Michelle, I appreciate you so much coming on, talking about what we're experiencing. So in a nutshell, I'm going to say we're seeing extended market times. We're seeing less showings. We are seeing seller concessions being given out. But we do have buyers in the marketplace that have a really good opportunity and are still taking advantage of it. So we're getting into that balanced market. So don't believe everything you read. And if you think it's wrong, give us a call. We'll be happy to give you what our experience is, and we can pull up the number in the data. That's the real talk. It does speak for itself. So thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And until next time, thanks.